Morning of August 19th, 1991. The clock on the Kremlin Tower had just struck 6 times. Vice President Gennady Yanayev appeared on Soviet television to announce that President Gorbachev, due to health reasons, could no longer perform his presidential duties, and that Yanayev would assume those powers temporarily, declaring a 6-month state of emergency. At the same time, a state committee on the state of emergency was formed, consisting of 8 key Soviet officials. They issued an appeal to the Soviet people, calling for support for the emergency committee. The shocking news stunned the Soviet public. At that moment, Gorbachev was on vacation by the Black Sea. The emergency committee placed him under house arrest, cutting off all communication with the outside world. Rumors quickly spread that the president had died. At 11 a.m., the committee issued its first decree, ordering all government bodies to enforce the state of emergency without exception, but met fierce resistance from reformists. At 11:46 a.m., Boris Yeltsin held a press conference at the Russian Parliament building, reading an appeal to the citizens of Russia, declaring the State Committee on the State of Emergency an illegal organization. At 12:15 p.m., Yeltsin climbed atop a tank sent to suppress the protesters, and without any broadcast equipment, gave a speech. He declared that all decrees issued by the Emergency Committee were null and void within Russia. Television later aired this footage, turning Yeltsin into a national hero and rallying massive public support. This dramatically changed the course of the coup. That night, August 20th, Yeltsin phoned U.S. President George Bush, seeking Western support. Soon, the U.S., UK, France, and Germany issued a unified condemnation of the Soviet Emergency Committee, isolating them diplomatically. In hindsight, if the coup plotters had acted immediately to detain Yeltsin, the outcome might have been very different. But by the time they realized the threat he posed, it was too late. Yeltsin already enjoyed widespread public support, and wavering generals switched sides to follow his command. On August 21st, Soviet Vice President brought Gorbachev back from vacation. At 9 p.m., Gorbachev announced he had regained control of the government. He said he would soon resume his presidential duties fully. On August 22nd, the 8 coup leaders were arrested. Though Gorbachev was free again, Yeltsin had effectively replaced him as the real leader in Moscow. In just 3 days, the coup, launched by top Soviet political and military leaders, had failed. It was the final attempt by the Communist Party conservatives to save the Soviet Union. The next day, Yeltsin banned all Communist Party activity in Russia. On August 24th, Gorbachev resigned as General Secretary of the Communist Party. On November 6th, the Communist Party, once boasting 20 million members, was dissolved. The very foundation of Soviet power crumbled. After the August 19th incident, nationalist movements surged, fueling both Russian and regional independence. On December 8th, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus declared their withdrawal from the Soviet Union, forming the Commonwealth of Independent States. Other republics quickly followed suit, and the USSR split into 15 nations. On December 25th, 1991, at 7:40 p.m., Gorbachev resigned as president of the Soviet Union. The Soviet flag, which had flown over the Kremlin for 69 years, was lowered. The once mighty Soviet Union had come to its end. The world's first socialist state was no more. The Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union ended with the USSR's collapse. For nearly half a century, both nations clashed but avoided full-scale war under the shadow of nuclear deterrence. Compared to the devastation of the 2 world wars, the Cold War, though tense, was progress for humanity. Yet, in their struggle for dominance, the US and USSR fueled countless regional conflicts and proxy wars. bringing suffering to many developing nations. The Cold War divided unified countries, East and West Germany, North and South Korea, North and South Vietnam. Among them, the Korean peninsula remains divided and unstable to this day. Unlike traditional power struggles, the Cold War was also a battle of ideologies and systems. Both superpowers sought to prove their social model superior. But in its final years, Gorbachev's reforms steered the USSR toward collapse, abandoning socialist ideals and creating chaos. Ultimately, public disillusionment led to the Union's disintegration. In sharp contrast, China rose rapidly, following a different reform path and achieving the opposite outcome. Through exploration, China forged its own path of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Reform and opening unleashed vitality. Economic growth led the world and created a miracle that astonished it. China's power and global influence continue to expand. The U.S. now views China as its new rival, with growing debate over whether a new Cold War is emerging. China, however, seeks peace, not hegemony, nor harm to other nations' interests. But if provoked or challenged over sovereignty, China will never back down. While the future remains uncertain, the lessons of the Soviet collapse remind us. We must always be prepared for the unknown.